Welcome to the Breakthrough Moments podcast, a podcast where challenges meet opportunities. I'm Harald, and together with my co-host Lasse, we explore stories of innovators, leaders, professionals, and entrepreneurs and how they turn obstacles into game-changing breakthroughs. Get ready for insights that inspire and lessons that last. Subscribe now and let's dive into the moments that define success. Welcome to today's podcast episode of the Breakthrough Moments podcast. Today's guest is Samantha Ollerton, a highly accomplished leader in the tech and consulting world. Samantha began her career as a forensic scientist before breaking into the business world and rising to the position of CEO in various organizations. Throughout her career, she has faced and navigated numerous challenges, including successfully pivoting businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, as the owner and director of Precision Plus Consulting, she helps small and medium-sized enterprises navigate their own paths to success, sharing her expertise in technology and business strategy. Welcome to the podcast, Samantha.
Thank you so much, Harald. It's amazing to be here.
So we've had a conversation before this where we got to know each other a bit better and where I've learned about your story, which I obviously prepared a bit about for the questions of today's podcast. But for the people that don't know you, who you are, what you do, and a bit about your background, could you give a brief introduction?
Sure. Well, I have an interesting story. There's not many people that could have traversed the world of hardcore science through to business, so I'll have a stab at describing it. Well, I started my career as a trained classical analytical chemist that then went into forensics. I worked for the Crown in the UK for over 10 years, where I provided expert evidence, mostly focused on counter-narcotics and explosives. I had the pleasure of doing all sorts of interesting things during that part of my career, but I decided to then traverse to one might call the dark side, which is the commercial world, where I took a position in a US headquartered NASDAQ deep tech business. And instead of being a user of technology, I then became a developer and an inventor of technology. Doing that for many years, moving continents. I then progressed on to 4-year tenure as CEO of a deep tech innovative business in Melbourne, Australia, taking technology from a university invention and bringing it to the world. So now for the last few months, I have been my own endeavors, having set up a business, a consulting business, Precision Plus Consulting, based out of the UK, but offering services to the world where, as you said, I'm really helping small and medium-sized enterprises navigate the world that I have charted rough and choppy seas of, and helping them do everything from raising money, making good products, understanding their customer, and really enjoying that process of giving back into what is quite a difficult, place to be, which is making deep tech products.
Yeah, we talked a bit about that when we spoke last as well in terms of the difficulty, the process behind actually developing something that works, the having all the teams in place and everything sorted, and it sounded like a quite complex environment. But you started the story and the career that you transitioned fairly quickly from science into leadership roles in business, which I guess was quite a major shift in terms of how things went, in terms of like going to the dark side, as you mentioned. Can you share kind of like a bit about what prompted you, what got you interested in doing that shift, and what challenges came your way in doing so?
I think it's a multiplexed answer. Having used technology solutions made by other companies and meeting the people behind them and, maybe being inspired by them, but at the same time, always thinking, I could do this and I could make something better as well. Then really enjoying people and nurturing people, leading people. When you're a forensic scientist and by training having to go to scenes of crime and then end up in court and being interrogated about your work, you end up with a real sense of integrity and a real knowledge base on the importance of what you know, but also what you don't know, and being open to that. And that is so important in business. So really the big shift for me was going from a space where, as a highly acclaimed and established and revered forensic scientist even though you go into courts of law and you are quite rightly questioned about, the facts and your opinion, you are still respected without
Mhm.
really too much problem. In the business world, however, you have to prove yourself in so many different ways. You can't just show up and do a good job. You do have to
Mm.
understand the politics. You do have to use your emotional intelligence. You do have to be resilient. And I think some of the resilience I was able to bring into my business practice came from being able to stand up in a court of law
Mm.
opposite people wearing silly wigs and gowns, which is how we do it in the United Kingdom, and really, make my case,
Mm.
but not lose myself in the purpose of doing that, still understanding what was right and what was wrong. So for me, I think it was the challenge,
Yeah.
the intro. And then the minute I started doing it, I absolutely loved it. And,
Yeah.
hence I am here today, now on the other side again, helping businesses be their best and grow their fastest and, imparting my knowledge of almost what not to do as much as what to do, Harold.
Yeah. It is interesting, like the fact that in science you kind of like have that authority embedded into the role and position that you have, but while in the commercial, in the private sector, it's like it's the last thing that you did that matters. It's not the track record necessarily in all these things. It's interesting that you can like face that hands-on, but also interesting how the experience from being a scientist, forensic scientist, and standing up in court, how that helped you, quote unquote, defend your case in the business space as well. Was there any other like things that you had to kind of like do to be able to navigate the when you started the uncharted waters in terms of gaining entry, climbing the ladder because you climbed fairly quickly. Was there
Yes,
anything that comes to mind?
I mean, there are barriers on all fronts. Being a woman is still a barrier. So in, my US corporate experience, I know it's not the same for everybody, but, showing up with all my credentials as a scientist, all my years of experience, it didn't matter a jot to the
Mm.
people who'd been doing the grind for those 10 years in that corporate business. Bringing in that purism is, I guess, the best way to describe it. And then learning
Mm.
quickly how cutthroat it can be. And, what I mean by that is, you know, maintaining your composure, not buying into the imposter syndrome, which can quickly happen. I
Mm.
know it's not just women that experience that. It can be anyone that suddenly ends up in a position of authority and then starts to undermine their own selves by not
Yeah.
believing they deserve to be there. And so really, being able to control that or regulate your emotions, being able to have still a high moral standard and integrity, being able to apply critical thinking, showing your value, going into the wrestling ring, some corporate environments almost encourage you to do,
Mm.
never been a yes person, Harold. And so one of my struggles, I think, was also that, if I was in a meeting and I didn't think that it was the right course of action, even if it was my boss or my boss's boss or the CEO, I was never afraid to stick my head above the parapet.
Mm.
And that got some attention and not
I
always,
bet.
positive attention because people can be intimidated, threatened, ideally inspired. I think I was fortunate in many ways that the CEO of this humongous company,
Mm.
saw that I wasn't afraid to tell the truth and to be open. And, I may be the only one in the room doing so. He appreciated that. So I think
Yeah.
there was a confluence of things and the right people in the right positions that enabled me to go faster, but doesn't mean that everybody liked me on the way. And you have to kind of get over that bit. You have to get over not everybody liking you,
Yeah.
because you can't be a people pleaser. You can't be a yes person if you want to truly live through integrity. And I believe go all the way to the top, which is what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that being a woman in this environment might be challenging. I guess there are probably going to be women listening to this, watching this, that might you do the same transition as you, going from science where you kind of like have that embedded authority into more the commercial world, the private, into a private company, or that just experience the challenges that face given industries that aren't that you could say welcoming to women. For example, shipping is one, especially if you move more to the east. For example, what recommendations would you have to those women that might experience a bit of the headbutting and the challenges that might come with just being a woman?
Yeah, no, and it's a great question and one I love to answer and one, I strive to give back now in my consulting and coaching. If you can find a role model who will take you under their wing, fantastic. And most importantly, then, if you can be one to others.
Mm.
So, creating a community to enable a safe passage for females in what might be a male-dominated cutthroat environment.
Yeah.
Joining networking opportunities, other women in business, there's various different organizations, and depending on what industry you're in, specific then to, but where you can share stories. And there's a lot of female leaders like myself who are giving back through those avenues. Also, be fearless. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want. If you think there's a disparity in how you're being remunerated or treated in comparison to other, potentially male members of your team, then ask for it. Also know your strengths and your weaknesses, but use that emotional intelligence that the majority of women, come embedded with. I know it's not every single one, but, statistics show that women have a certain emotional intelligence. That's why, for example, a lot of the forensic scientists I worked with in my early career were women because of the
Sure.
approach, the calm, the attention to detail, the ability to think in crisis. And
Yeah.
crisis management is ultimately one of the superpowers that you will need. Resist that imposter syndrome and just go for it.
Mm.
Just go for it. Be unapologetic. Don't, become one of the guys to be equal. You can still be feminine. You can still, be you. But don't assume the position that may be that old school position. And it is very different in different, workplaces, industries, scenarios, but try and find your people, try and find your
Yeah.
tribe, the people that will have your back.
Yeah. You mentioned that the transition out of forensics and science, you got to Australia and the US and the States. How has this been different? Like, has there been any significant difference in terms of the culture, how women have been received, what the competitiveness and experience of those different markets?
It's quite different. And
Mm.
actually, I was more surprised at Australia because I thought it would be more familiar. It's almost like, I mean, we're cousins, right? The
Yeah.
Brits and the Australians, but it's quite an old-fashioned
Mm.
country. And that can make it charming, but also it can make it, interesting when
Yeah.
you're, around the board table. So America for me was it trained me to work and work and work and work. And I had to really find the balance to regain that ability to be myself, the
Yeah.
work-life balance. I had a position where I could have as much time off as I wanted, as long as I was always available.
Mm.
And what does that mean? You're never
Yeah.
off. You can just switch your phone off. And, I loved it. I loved it. But when I came out of it, I realized the impact it was having on my health,
Mm.
my, emotions, my mental ability. I was resilient, but I was constantly in fight or flight mode. And the impact that has on all of us, especially as we progress through our decades, the impact of cortisol and all of these like hormones on the body, it's not good for you. And it's only when you stop and look around, and that's when I developed, a very deep interest in meditation and mindfulness and made it a large part of my life. But I am glad to be out of that American cutthroat nonstop, which was the
Yeah.
expectation. It was, you have to work hard to not just do that and be that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember we talked a bit about this when we spoke last as well, in terms of how huge a difference there is, especially from, let's say, Europe and the US. And I've had a couple of conversations and podcasts with people that also highlighted the difference in terms of Europe focuses more on let's ensure that everyone has what they need kind of vibe,
Mhm.
while the US is like it's Darwinism, it's survival of the fittest, it's
Oh, yeah,
results, 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 results.
100.
But it's interesting how he pointed out that Australia was so different because one of the things was that when the pandemic hit, you were in Australia
Melbourne,
and
Australia.
Melbourne, Australia, and it was quite an experience that I remember you mentioned last time. And one of the things that I found quite inspiring was how you navigated that in terms of the lockdown, the people and the staff, and how you navigated those waters in terms of ensuring that, okay, uh, we don't need to fire a bunch of people. Let's refocus the efforts. So let's refocus the workforce. Can you take us through what that period was like, and also a bit maybe into what you did before everything shut down? What you were
Mm.
looking out the window, you saw the container ships just staying stuck, and then navigating the years that the pandemic was.
Yes, no, I mean, I think the 3 million people that were in central Melbourne, I don't know if we're all going to write books about it, in the next 20 years, but it was quite an experience and one that was incomparable to the rest of the world. I recall, landing back into Melbourne from Indonesia, which had been the first place I'd gone to as the CEO of this company. And I'd only been in post for 3 months, and so in those 90 days, I was busy trying to do the, 90 days of a CEO, make the biggest impression, do all of the things that you need to do to secure the future. And we were on a fantastic path. I was
Mm,
getting to grips with the product itself, which was born out of the University of Tasmania. I was building the team. We were ready to go with product, and literally building up a sales pipeline with the rest of the world. So, I was brought in as a global expert with the network to do just that. And I remember being in Jakarta and we'd just done this trade show and there was no one there. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be fine. I think 2 days later, as I recalled with yourself during our conversation, looking out the window and seeing a cruise ship stuck out there, and then the news of the borders are shut,
mm,
literally realizing that I was stuck in Australia. And that's a long bloody way from my family and the rest of the world. And I'm trying to make a bomb detector that is
mhm,
going to secure borders and cargo and passengers and all of the things that looked like they weren't going to actually be operating. And so within those first few days, the enormity of the situation, me very hard, but not in
mm,
a panic way. I think I described earlier my ability to operate in crisis mode, which does come from years of training in the forensics world, but also innately within me. And it's one of my superpowers, the ability to remain calm in the storm, to think outside the box, to not be contained by a fear or inability to see what could be possible. And
mm,
I think it was around about 5 days, certainly less than a week. And we had a team of 30 people that we had re-engaged onto a program of work that was from the Victorian government to make 4,000 ventilators for the
mm,
Australian people. So I managed to keep my entire team employed and myself and my scientists, meanwhile, because, we weren't going to go and make ventilators. I mean, we could, but, we were better placed thinking of stuff to do with the IP and the patents that we had.
mhm,
So we started making a breathalyzer for COVID. And so I gathered a team of scientists and engineers from all of the Australasian universities. We put in proposals, we got grant money, we secured money from global organizations, and we spent 18 months developing a breathalyzer. So, in that pivot, in that ability to, even though, of course, I had the board and I had the shareholders, dealing with their own other businesses,
Mhm.
shutting them down, putting people into furlough. They had all sorts of different government initiatives where you could keep people employed, but, with a very little money to support them.
Mhm.
And even managed to keep all my people on visas, employed and in the country, whereas there were hordes of,
Mhm.
people on their visas. I mean, I was on a visa who were going home because they're like, why would I stay here when I don't
Yeah.
know what the future holds and I don't have a job? So positive and being proactive. And even though personally it was scary because, you don't know what's going to happen. You've got elderly relatives back in the UK, you don't know when you're going to see them. And should you get on the aeroplane and go and see them? But fundamentally, it was one of the most amazing periods of my career and my life
Mm.
because I was able to focus on making something really important,
Yeah.
not only to keep people alive, but also to prevent or identify early disease.
Yeah. It's interesting because I remember like the everything shutting down in the world, and then the core part of the business is explosives detection, where like no bore is open,
Nope.
nothing where that particular equipment would be installed is being used. And pivoting that to ventilators and those kinds of things, and while keeping all the stuff, I found that to be like that's interesting because a lot of people couldn't say the same thing, and like everything shut down, everything fell apart.
Hmm.
And there are a couple of like leadership traits that you need to have to be able to navigate those types of waters. Like, what do you feel would be and are the most important leadership qualities to lead a team through such a, you could call it crisis or such a situation as the pandemics were?
It was intense, Harold. As much as I was able to move forward quickly in my
Hmm.
mind, taking care of the team and keeping them positive and motivated, you know, me having a clear head, being able to communicate well, openly, clearly, to the team, listening to the concerns, their problems, from the small stuff to the big stuff, because we were all in the same place at the same
Yeah.
time and no one else was allowed out. Keeping morale high, even being able to, have people stay back and have drinks and pizza, in the office after doing a day of work, and then they make their way home through the quiet streets of Melbourne. And decisiveness, being
Hmm.
very clear about the path forward enables people to have confidence and to feel comfort that, all of the government messaging wasn't that. So
Yeah.
at least I could be somebody in their world who was able to convey a sense of a path forwards and of
Hmm.
hope, not of hopelessness. So really, for myself, it was being open-minded, lateral thinking, and clear-headed, and then making sure my team was okay,
Yeah.
because it was lonely, it was lonely being in a city where, we were allowed outside 1 hour a day. We had a curfew from 9 p.m. till 5 a.m. And that went on for, a year and a half. You know, Everybody else in the world was out. Well, apart from, like China and other places in Asia, which went in and out. But all my friends in Europe and the UK and the US, they were all out on holidays and
Yeah.
enjoying
Yeah.
themselves. It was a surreal time. It was a surreal time. But like I said, one of the most pivotal moments in my career, let alone the pivot
Hmm.
that we did at the time.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm always fascinated about is that just how do you adapt to situations like this. One is, you could say, leadership traits in terms of getting the team with you. And I definitely think that a team and the morale and the culture is what makes or breaks a company. And having that trait as a leader is so important. And it is very nice to just have that listed, like you need to have this, and that.
Hmm.
Of course, it would depend on the leader themselves and what type of style of leadership they have. But adaptability is ultimately the core thing here. And it sounds like it's been the thing with your career as well, like moving from forensic scientist to the dark side, if we're going to continue using that term, and then the pandemic, and then now in the later months, in terms of going your own path. How do you think, or what do you think is the best, you could say, path or way for someone to like hone and develop that skill set of being adaptable to the surrounding?
I think that mindset is everything, Harold.
Mm,
Have to really work hard on your mindset. And what does that mean? Superpower I have, I mentioned earlier, is resilience. And how do
mm,
I build or maintain that resilience? It's through taking care of myself. It's through being mindful. It's through daily practices that enable me to reconnect with myself, and whatever your belief system, the things that surround us, whether it's going for a walk in nature, whether it's yoga, whether it's, playing tennis, it's taking the time out to okay with yourself.
mm,
And that then bleeds into regulating your emotions, being able to be positive, to have a perspective of always creating value. So always giving something into this world, always putting something into this world. And then that bleeds then into the people that surround you. Your team, they feel valued because you're creating value around them and you see them and you hear them.
mhm.
They're not just a cog in the wheel, they're actually a person that matters. And that style of team leadership for me, sounds extreme, but I'm like, I like it when a team is, they will bleed for me. They will bleed for me and the purpose because we are all in it together.
Yeah,
We are all totally bought in to the objective and the goal and the whys and wherefores. And if people come into that and they don't feel the same way, they quickly fall off. But that happens anyway. The value that team members get when you walk into the workplace clear-minded, with that positive attitude, having got your own self right. And it's the same in any relationship, right? It's the same in a friendship, a love ship, as well as
mhm.
a workship relationship. You can't expect to arrive with a bunch of baggage and everything to be okay. So you have to focus on
Yeah,
getting mindset right. And however that is, everybody's different. And there isn't one thing that does it all for everybody, but that's certainly been my experience. And that is my superpower that gives me the resilience, to be
yeah,
adaptable. Always find a way.
yeah, yeah. I like that because I had actually was it 2 weeks ago? I had a podcast with a gentleman that said that exact thing as a way to bring the culture and the company together. Like ultimately, you got to find
Hmm.
a way to get to the destination that you want to go. But
Hmm.
I find it interesting because the more at least I've been on my entrepreneurial journey since 2011, it's always been that mindset is everything. I remember when I heard that when I started, I was like, can't be real. Like mindset, you got to be strategies, tactic, how to do stuff, and more the tangible things. But the more I've experienced, the more I completely resonate with what you said in terms of mindset is everything. It's how you perceive things. It's how you uh, convert a, let's say, a objectively negative thing into something subjectively positive, and how you basically are able to handle whatever the world throws at you. Because there is a quote, and I'm trying to paraphrase correctly, and that is, you don't have any control of what's going to happen to you, but you have 100% control over how you act on what's happening around you.
Hmm.
And I think that is so important for people to reflect on, but also try to embed into their own mindset. But for people, let's say that if you look back, you mentioned that once you got out of that, let's say, rat race of the US and how that was kind of like we had to be on 24/7 to having gotten out of that, it was that demanding.
Hmm.
In the situation, because you said that after going out of that, you found your, let's say, not necessarily passion, but your appreciation of meditation, for example. Did you have that when in that kind of like that race in the US, or was that something that came after?
It actually came to me in the last, so 2 years of a 7 year race.
Mm.
And it was one of those things that I had seen and heard, and people had shared with me, oh, yeah, mindfulness or mindset and everything. And what I had really observed in myself was that in really challenging situations, I had stopped responding and I had started reacting.
Mm.
And I could see myself doing it, and I could see how it didn't assist in any situation, even though, when you know you're absolutely right and you want to make your point and everything, and the reactivity didn't lead anywhere good. It only just
Yeah.
got down a rabbit hole. And the minute you cannot sleep, and the minute you are taking that baggage home and it's affecting all of your relationships, is the minute you have to stop and really self-reflect and what it is and how you've changed, because it was changing me as a person and I didn't
Mm.
particularly like it. So it took me a long time, though, Harold, to actually teach myself how to meditate, because it's very hard to teach somebody how to meditate. People have
Yeah.
to first find their own way to it. And, one thing led to another. And of course, applying my scientific mind to it, I'm, reading all about the CIA hemisync experience and, how to train your brain to do X, Y, Z, and Joe Dispenza. And, I spent a lot of time and energy and some money exploring different versions of the same destination. So,
Mm.
different journeys, but you get to the same place. And I would say that I didn't refine it to where it is now until I got into lockdown Australia, where I had plenty
Mm.
of space because I wasn't surrounded by people in the same way. I got to choose who to talk to on Zoom or
Yeah.
Teams or whichever version. And so that's where I got to refine it. And that's where I
Mm.
became, I believe, the best version of who I could be, because can now tap into that inner wisdom, that connection to everything. And I don't carry what I used to carry anymore. And so
Yeah.
I arrive as I am. I am in the present, and I just choose to be in the right rooms now, which enabled me to do my business now, because I choose to be with the best and the brightest, and the people I really want to help,
Mm.
be the best versions of themselves and get there quicker than I did,
Yeah, I like that. It's we all have different paths to meditation and mindfulness, and I feel like the way mindfulness to some degree has been introduced to society is a bit alienating for most people. It's a bit like a bit woo-woo and out
Mhm.
there, but I think it's important to find your own path to it. For example, one thing which is funny, I have a bit of an absurd way in one of my ways to meditation. That is, I'm laying on this acupuncture mat, and I have Alan Watts or the dispense on my ears, and this with these headphones, and I have like a blanket on my eyes, and that is where you can meditate,
Yeah.
because the acupuncture mat makes me go into the body and out of the mind.
Hmm.
But you have a lot of different ways that people can do it.
Hmm.
And I think if someone is considering it, just try different things. Don't force it, and like try to listen and feel what feels right to you.
I
Um,
completely agree with that, because it can be quite cliquey.
yeah,
When I was in Los Angeles, as an example, and those 2 years starting to venture out and see what was there, it was so over the top. I mean, there's actually some really funny, like, comedians doing skits about, everybody who's a healer and everything.
yeah,
And if you meet those people, and they're like the extroversion of everything, and it can feel like quite, whoa, I don't understand this, and there's no one really speaking normal people language. So yeah, no, and that's it. I encourage all of my friends, as well as people I work with, to explore it. As a
mm,
scientist, it's tough though, because
yeah,
the science world is still pretty hardcore on, poo-pooing things that are not necessarily proven, and I think
mm,
the conversations I am now able to have when I do go on retreats, or when I do spend time with my favorite healers, I could never have those conversations in the room with some of my scientist friends. They just wouldn't
Mm.
get it. They wouldn't get
Yeah.
it, but that's okay. It's no judgment from me. I think whatever it takes to show up as, the best version of you and the truest version of you. Because, when we are in our truly authentic self, that's when we're the best, we can be. And surely that applies to business as well as to, our home life.
Yeah. And I think it's an important thing to think about. Like, to some degree, it comes back to kind of like being a pleaser or not, to some degree. Like, if you
Mhm.
go into this and you kind of like want to facilitate for everyone, your path is not the path for everyone else. And that is what I believe to be very important. Like,
Mhm.
everyone is on their own path and on their own timeline. So if it
Yes.
took you 2 years, it might take someone else 10. It
Yes.
might take someone else a month to really get into it. And I think that difference is what makes us unique as well. But to moving on to a different topic, one of the things that we talked a lot about, given the background that you have in kind of deep tech, is how should we put it, the global launch of AI, because it's
Mhm.
become quite a buzzword for the past couple of years.
Mhm.
Like AI here, AI there, and it's become more of a buzzword and hype than necessarily actual tangible things to like actually use. Like imagine how many trillions and billions of dollars has gone into AI development where there's not much to show for.
Mhm.
Um, how do you think, and how do you recommend businesses navigate that landscape and not getting caught in the let's use the buzzword trap to gain traction, to gain basically gain traction and awareness and info for the business? What
Mhm.
should they do and how can they handle that?
It's a really interesting point, and it's changing every day. The news now is dominated by stories about AI, whether it's in business or whether it's fake news or fake
Mm.
representations of artists to make music or movies or whatever. So the average person has heard about AI, but they don't necessarily know what it is. And somebody like myself that has been working with deep tech products, for the last 15 years
Yeah.
and training boxes to be smarter than the human, because every box that I am involved with ends up in the hands of a non-expert user, because it's either looking at disease diagnostics or bomb detection or any of those measurement science markets in between. And so what do we do to do that? Well, we train the box, the detector, to understand its environments and to then be able
Mm.
to say, yes, there's something or no, there's not something. And, machine learning, which is, training a computer algorithm to understand the difference between yes and no, a positive identification or not, is what everybody in measurement science has been looking at. Fieldable measurement science instruments has
Mm.
been looking at for years. And, we're delighted with the advent of better machine learning and machine learning algorithms, because it means that we can start to get down into wearable tech and things that
Yeah.
were once impossible. Because breath diagnostics, for example, you don't necessarily have to identify virus in the breath. You can look for the biomarkers or the
Mm.
fingerprint of what a disease would look like. And that has come about in the advent of better machine learning and algorithms. The way that AI, though, has been bandied around, so to speak, and certainly even how we've seen the big AI players now behaving, because I think the amount of money and investment that went into tech businesses, whatever stage they were at, and they haven't delivered on whatever it is they were promising to deliver on. Even the big companies are either consolidating or refining what it is they're investing in. Because the stock market and the average person, especially with a lot of average people investing in
Mm.
tech stocks, I think as a business, if you're going into something that involves AI, you have to be very clear on what your messaging is.
Yeah.
Because if you start to promise anything, and this could be any service or product around AI or even any great grandiose claim, we are not in, the 2015s. we are not in the era anymore where you can get ridiculous amounts of VC money because you have the buzzwords in it. You have to
Mm.
demonstrate capability, you have to demonstrate product market fit, you have to demonstrate credible sales pipeline. And so don't necessarily know that smart money would go for just an AI sale right now, because I think it's already cannibalized itself,
Yeah.
and AI still isn't even all that. Yes, we can see all these crazy arts, we can see these deep fake, rap songs, but it's going to be a while until we work out exactly what to do with it in the real world beyond let's have a chat GPT that we
Yeah.
can tap into. Let's have automated responses here. What's interesting though is, the general populace, because of this divisiveness in terms of conspiracy theories and everything else, it's always going to be this big, huge doomsday thinking with the average person. But from a business perspective, be just really clear. How are you using machine learning or AI to make your service or product better? Try
Mm.
and stay above just defaulting to using a buzzword, because I think those days are over.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been working a lot with thinking through and planning and looking at the infrastructure for AI in the past couple of years in Bureau. And it's interesting how we haven't seen kind of like the default way or the go-to use case, well, let's say generative LLMs. It's still something that is a buzzword,
Uh-huh.
and most of the things that you see is just a wrapper around using the endpoints and the API of the ChatGPT or similar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because one thing I listened to a podcast a while back. This is probably a year ago. I can't remember the name of the podcast or the guy that said this, but he said something like the invention or the launch of generative LLMs have made it way easier for someone to seem credible and to seem and project a expertise that they don't necessarily have.
Mm-hmm.
And I've discussed with people that, especially in, let's say, recruiting and HR, you have dozens and hundreds upon applicants that have used ChatGPT. They, in terms of just seeing how little effort they put into it, they've forgotten to replace your name here. So you have kind of
Oh.
like, yeah, you have all of these different things, and just what is it gonna result in? Because I also had a conversation with a couple of the most frontier AI guys in cognitive AI,
Oh.
not the company, but looking at how can you replicate the brain,
Mm-hmm.
because most processes that we think about problem solving could be a reasoning logic. So they're trying to imitate the sub parts of reflection, and
Mm-hmm.
that is going to change a lot. But again, we're not at a technical standpoint yet where it has the capability of actually doing those grandiose things that people promise today. But I
Yeah.
find it also interesting how, because you're not the first one saying that access to capital is different now than pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It is harder. The VCs and LPs and investment firms, they want the hard facts, not just necessarily just buying into the cloudy vision or the dreamy vision and the buzzwords, but looking into kind of like the future, because now you're on the path of consulting and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what got you into that, and why coaching? Like, what is it that kind of like drives you to, okay, this is the next chapter of my life?
Well, I think that, my initial foray into consulting and, meeting some absolutely inspiring C-suite executives, founders, inventors that go across the broad spectrum of my world, which can be engineers, scientists, or just somebody with a really good idea who knows how to do business, but doesn't
Mm,
know how to execute in terms of investment. And in my consulting business, I'm doing everything from holding the hand of the investor who wants to make a smart investment into pharma, ESG,
mm,
med tech, defense, and then on the other side, the founder, the inventor, and sometimes in just a very deep development phase, who's got this fantastic platform, but to like, where should I go first? Where's the low-hanging
Yeah.
fruit? Where is the thing that's going to change the world? I'm going to leave my imprint on the world, but how can I do it better, faster, all of the rest of it? And in doing that, Harold, I, just reignited my passion for nurturing and mentoring and encouraging people, and have always been complimented on my ability to come up with good advice, feedback, answers, solutions. And so going into that coaching side, the really being that voice that can sit, on somebody's shoulder as they're dealing with a tough situation. Because I've been at the top. I know how
Yeah.
lonely it is. I know how lonely the journey to the top is. I know what it is to deal with difficult personalities, situations, those forks in the road where you need that impartial perspective, because of course you can't tell somebody what to do. You can just paint the picture of their opportunities or perspective of what each one could offer or not. It's
Mm.
hard to get that because you don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to involve your partner or your friends. You certainly can't show weakness in the workplace. This is how your head thinks, when you're on
Yeah.
that journey. So being able to do that, but with the slant. We talked about mindfulness, and how important that is. Really want to be able to also then enable that to be accessible, and
Yeah.
accessible to people who, are in a box like I was, which is, highly technical, brilliant, and diverting into something which can seem more like, a little bit less proven, or there isn't a prescription, path
Yeah.
on how to get there. Also providing a safe space, to help people get on the path to that, and
Yeah.
again to talk about it. So that's it. People drive my purpose, and my purpose for the remainder of my career, which I don't see stopping anytime soon. I always laugh at people when they say they're going to retire, because I'm like, well, you can still do both. You can still live your life and, input into the world. The days of, downing tools at 50, I don't know many people who did that and, didn't start something else already. Not the ones that have minds, that are
Yeah.
excited and adventurous anyway.
Yeah. I like that. It's and I resonate with that. The fact of giving advice based on your skill set of someone that hasn't come necessarily as far
Hmm.
on their journey, where you can guide someone from A to B when you're at C.
Hmm.
And it's basically like that. It's I think that's noble because we need that, especially at the top. It's lonely at the top.
It's
It's
lonely at the
lonely
top.
when
There's not many women as well in the public arena who are doing this. That you go on, I watch a lot of different YouTube channels. I have a lot of people that I follow, which I really respect, but are any of them women? In the large part, it's male. And, I like to, provide a female perspective, but which isn't exclusive to women. It's just, I think that there is an opportunity to share stories that resonate across the board, no
yeah,
matter where you've come from, or how you identify. That's absolutely something I want to focus on. I want to get all these cool products out and change the world and leave my legacy, but I also want to help the people that I can along the way.
I really like that. The final question to wrap up this podcast. I gave you this ahead of time because it's quite a big question to answer, but it goes like this. If you could get an answer to one question related to your business and what you do, what would it be and what would you like to know?
So mine is from a personal perspective and a practical perspective, because of course, when you're operating a business, you want it to be successful enough that you're motivated to continue, and it's
Mm.
financially rewarding and all of those other things. But for me, it's what is the biggest problem I am trying to solve in my business? And with that, I mean, in case of my consulting, what is the biggest problem that my clients are trying to solve that I can assist with? Because I want to work on really important stuff. I am
Mm.
working with clients on early stage, cancer diagnostics that could end up in everybody's home, that you would have your own system that you could, diagnose yourself at home for early stage 30 different cancers.
Mm.
I am looking at, detection of, malaria and tuberculosis in far-flung regions of Africa. I'm of course looking at, intercepting, the epidemic of synthetic opiates that are coming
Mm.
into not just Northern America, but also into Europe. I want to make a change. I want to do something important. It's always been in the driver of what I do. Hence, I've worked in counterterrorism, counter narcotics, illicit material identification. It's important to me to leave a legacy. So knowing what is the most important thing that my
Mm.
business, whether it be a product or service, can do to enable me to focus on the right things, because the opportunities may come where they are high cash reward but low soul fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I'm not in that phase anymore. It's not about the money for me. I want to do something that is important for humanity and the earth.
Mm.
And I think if more of us thought like that, then we would be doing more good stuff. It's happy for me to report that there are some really cool technologies going on in environmental protection and saving the planet. Because that's kind of what we need to worry
Yeah.
about more, is us and this planet. Everything else is inconsequential. That's the question to myself, and one that I try and answer every day so that I can stay focused on, that mission.
Yeah. I think that is important. And if someone wants to find you, contact you, follow along, maybe they have a project that they believe you could aid on, where can they find you and where can I reach out?
Well, you can Google me. You can actually Google Samantha Ollerton explosives and find quite a lot about me. I did quite a lot of press and media when I was in Australia, working on the breathalyzer and the bomb detection work that I've done. But my website, precisionplusconsulting.com, you can connect with me through there. Also, you can find me LinkedIn. I'm really interested to network with people. I want to meet like-minded folk. Finding my tribe in this era of my career and life is important to me. And I am lucky enough to exist on a couple of different continents, currently in Wales and the United Kingdom, but spend a lot of my time in the US in Los Angeles and also in Mexico and Puerto Vallarta. So please reach out and connect. It would be my pleasure. And thank you for your time, Harold. This has been a really lovely moment in my time. And thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
Of course, and thank you for being part of the podcast.